Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. I think it is indeed a very important piece of legislation that we are debating early this morning. But what is of interest to me, and which I'd like to share with you, sir, and with all Mauritians who are interested in really learning about les dessous of this piece of legislation that is being proposed by government, is the manner in which it is being proposed to this August Assembly. Having heard most members of this House, it is clear, I hope, for all reasonable people who understand what has been uttered on both sides of the House, that clearly government will not be able to pass this legislation. The government does not have the figures that it requires in order to pass this law. We have heard Honorable Sisankar making a plea, almost blaming the PMSD as to their absence, trying to cause a rift between the PMSD and the MSM. Now, he wasn't very subtle about it, but in my humble view, it was all political strategy on his part. And the reason why this strategy was being used by him, I do not know whether, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, it was coming from him personally or whether he was directed that he should have acted in that manner. He only knows the truth. But what is important for us to know is that government is aware, and that is uncontested, is already aware that this piece of legislation is guaranteed to fail. It will not pass the required number of votes required. It will not achieve it. Government knows it. Now, if government knows that, it has also heard the arguments put forward by the opposition. It has heard the very detailed arguments put forward by the opposition. The opposition has not been unreasonable in its approach to its analysis of this bill. The opposition has put together arguments that really hold water. True it is, there is consensus on the part of this whole assembly that there should be a bill to regulate political financing. So at least let me get through what we agree on. But the fact is, in spite of knowing that they will not get this piece of legislation through, and having heard the arguments of the opposition that make sense, the government has decided that they are going to call for this debate at this early hour of the morning for one very good reason and no other reason at all. The reason is they do not want to give wide publicity to the arguments that damage the law that is already damaged because of their damaged work. That is the only reason. They do not want people outside to know and to hear the damaging arguments that can be thrown in their direction. They do not want that, because their strategy, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, will be to go out there at the end of this debate and to say, well, we made a promise to you, electorate. We came with this piece of legislation that we promised we would in our electoral manifesto. Therefore, we are the good guys. And those are the people who are the bad guys. And they will use all means of communication that is, and I'll get to that in a moment, free of charge for them, and make an abuse of that facility and facilities, be it from parastatal bodies, be it from companies that in which shares are owned by government, but they will make an abuse of all those facilities, and all this has a cost. Pre-election and pre-nomination day, all this has a cost. And all this will not be accounted for in the political financing bill, because it has to be to the advantage of the ruling alliance. I cannot call it Alliance Les Peuples anymore for two reasons. Because it is no longer the alliance that presented itself before the electorate in 2014. I cannot call it Alliance Les Peuples anymore because precisely certain colleague ministers of the other ministers on the other side are no longer there. And I cannot call it l'Alliance des Peuples anymore because it is totally disconnected with the people. So how can they ascribe themselves that qualification and that adjective? I don't know how they could do that. In January 2015, if you will recall, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, we had just gone through a general election. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, we had just been put into opposition. I was not here to get sworn in at the beginning with other members, but I got sworn in January of 2015 because I was not in Mauritius. I was. And once I had skied away with my children and decided to come to Mauritius, I met a very senior member of this government in this assembly, and he was a very imposing character. A senior minister of this government, an imposing character with interesting characteristics. And I met him on the balcony of Government House where he was smoking away and pumping away his cigarette. I have not even mentioned his name, and some people seem to have recognized who that interesting character could be. And when I met him on that balcony there, he called unto me and he said, "Hey, Mohamed." In other words, he was so assured of himself that he was summoning me.
He was friends with you.
You don't talk to friends in that manner. Come here. He said, "I am going to finish off Mr. Daoud Rawat." That's what he said to me. And he said in January 2015, "I will finish off Daoud Rawat because he is the one who finances the Labour Party and the leader of the Labour Party, Dr. Nabin Amullah." January 2015. And I did not really understand what really he meant. And the reason why I say that today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, is because this whole issue about political financing, there's a lot of hypocrisy around it. There's a lot of hypocrisy around it. And I do recall a lot of interesting articles in the press, be it in L'Express and Mauricien, that both made allusion to the hypocrisy around this whole issue about political financing. Now, no disrespect meant, but les donneurs de leçons, who are government, in my humble view, have since 2015, oh no, even during the electoral campaign of 2014, been so good at occupying the moral high ground to tell everyone that, oh, look, on the other side, the Labour Party and its allies, they are people who benefit from financing from occult sources. They've done that. And even after the elections, they have gone on and on and on. As I said, it started in January 2015, when a senior most member of the government, led by Sir Aniwul Jagnat, told me at the very beginning of his mandate that he would finish off Daoud Rawat because of political financing to the Labour Party. This is how this mandate of this government started, and it is important that we remind the population of that. But then, In those days, the senior most imposing character who said that to me was a friend and a brother in arms of all those sitting on the other side. And today, how easily some of them, not all of them, say they do not know him anymore to save their own skin. They agreed with everything he said, but today they chastise him. They agreed with all the wrong he did, but they do not agree with him now.
Mohamed.
Yes?
He is not the gentleman you are referring to. He is not the subject of today's debate. Can you get back to the piece of legislation we are debating? You've made reference to him. I understand you had a talk with him. That's a long time back. Let us get to the piece of legislation we are debating today, please.
It has to do, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir.
No, it doesn't.
If you'd allow me to go on.
No, I said no.
Should I sit down?
The piece of legislation.
Yes, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, please do.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, now when I see exactly certain interesting articles, as I said, Le Mauricien, talk about political financing. When I was at the last occasion when this debate was being, at the last session, we had Honorable Ratna, who made allusions to coffers. And obviously, we all know he was making reference to the Labour Party. He didn't even have to make reference, but he said exactly what he wanted to say. And it's not the first time that he said that, trying to make allusion to the Labour Party and the coffers and the money in the coffers that were seized, the 200 and so million rupees, etc., etc. But the hypocrisy behind it is what? The MSM pretend that they have never obtained political financing because money was found in a safe, and it has been clearly been said to be political contributions belonging to a party. What the MSM has done, and I lay the blame at the feet of the MSM, is to come up with a totally crazy story in order to cut financing away from the Labour Party. Make sure that the main political adversary of government cannot in any way operate by ensuring that we are going to give a bad name to the political party called the Labour Party, because they are the political adversaries that are threatening to the MSM. That is the strategy that has been adopted. And once they've done that, they gone, as I said to the gentleman that you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, said I was referring to earlier, ensured that there was certain issues that were supposedly brought up in the middle of the night in March, pull out a license of Brahma Bank, ensure that all of a sudden we destroy someone who allegedly was financing the Labour Party. We have accusations against the MMM. Supposedly the MMM received money from BAI, etc., etc., etc. But then, at the same time, and I point the finger at the MSM, what they have done is a systematic manner, their strategy in what they've done in making sure that the political adversaries are destroyed financially, reputation-wise, and because it was to their advantage to do it. It was intelligent strategy, but dangerous for democracy. And in Le Mauricien of the 4th of June 2017, I read in that particular newspaper edition, and I quote, en 2010, alors qu'il est, and it's in 2017, alors qu'il est en alliance avec le Parti Travailliste et le PMSD, c'est une somme totale de 19 millions qui aurait alimenté le compte du MSM à la Brahma Bank comme suit. And there, in that press article, it gives details of 6 occasions. And I recall Saniwu Jagnat saying, I only received 200,000 rupees from Daoud Rawat, nothing more. I remember that when he defended himself by saying, and intelligently so, trying to place himself beneath the limit of allowable contributions by law. And he only gave me 200,000 rupees, he said. But then again, when this article was in the press, did this party of the MSM, occupying the moral high ground, did it come forward to come and explain any of the allegations put forward in that press article? No. Did it do anything to seek redress or communicate to come and say that this is not true? The fact that the MSM, led by Sir Anirudh Jagnnath, oh no, led by Praveen Jagnnath in 2010, the actual Prime Minister, did not even come with a communique to come and say that this is not true. Should I therefore presume that it is true in the absence of any communique stating that the article in the Mauricien is a bunch of nonsense? What should I presume? What should the people presume? That on the 23rd of April 2010, a sum of 5 million rupees was received in the bank account of the MSM. On the 30th of April 2010, a sum of 5 million rupees was received. On the 20th of May 2010, a sum of 5 million rupees was received. On the 24th of August 2010, on the eve of my birthday, I didn't receive the million, but they received the 2 million. On the 1st of November, another million. I guess it was a bad day. Not enough. Compared to the funds that they were taking in from that very same source. The very same source that this gentleman said that he would finish off because he was financing Navin Ramgoolam and the Labour Party. But the 23rd of November 2010, another million. Another million. And then, why is it that the MSM does not in any way come forward to say exactly that? Why is it that they don't come forward to tell us whether or not this is correct? But then, just like Honorable Sisankar is now holding his head as if he's having a headache, I can only say, bear with me more, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, because there's more to come. You see, I have done my research as well. And let me at the outset say, because maybe Honorable Colin Davidu would speak after me, will say, well, you know, he should have declared his interest because he's a lawyer of Daud Rawat. I am not. And here I am not. And this is about the British American investment with whom I've never represented legally. Unlike certain members on the other side who have been on retainer fees for British American investment, and they know exactly whom I'm talking about. And I don't mean the Attorney General. I'd like to clear that. I don't mean the Attorney General. I could be wrong, but I didn't mean you at all there. But then again, the 28th of April 2010. Huh? Oh. Huh? Let's talk about the 21st of April first. I have here a letter from British American Investment instructing the manager of State Bank of Mauritius, of State Bank Tower, attention Paddy Ning, to transfer the sum of 5 million rupees. I have another letter. Let me go through all of it first and then I will table it. 28th of April, another sum of 5 million rupees to transfer and the bank statement that goes with it. I have another document, the 23rd of November. I have another document and all the documents to establish the dates of all those millions that the MSM has received. And then, I'm not saying that political parties do not receive contributions. I'm not going to be hypocritical about it, but I'm not going to take the moral ground and say that we only received 200,000 rupees. That I'm not going to say. I'm not going to point the finger at people in an accusatory method, but I forget that I've got several fingers pointing at me. Some people on the other side forget that. They try to pretend that they have never received any contribution from British American investment. They are good at accusing the MMM, and I hold no brief for the MMM. And let us also clearly say, we are not talking any position of alliance here. Let's be very careful. But what I do not like is for people to take the high moral ground and start criticizing when in truth they themselves. Let us not forget, Honorable Prime Minister was trying to make allusion about the bad, the illicit source of the funding to the MMM, that they should have been aware. What does he say about this one now? That very same article, that very same article talks about the details that was received, all the money that was received. But then again, the hypocrisy behind this. But then again, I say it again, I'm saying at 1:07 in the morning, not a lot of people are going to be hearing this. So that was also excellent strategy. One thing we cannot really blame government for is that they are cunning in their methodology. And they are so cunning in their methodology in placement of bills. It is their right according to standing orders. I can only bow to it. But then again, in this age of modern technology, you cannot really hide from much. So why is it, I come back to that, I am told in January we're going to finish off someone, and then you have the same article, in the same press articles reporting other interesting remarks. And what it is, that you have people from the MSM, even that great gentleman with the character I'm talking about, removing over 5 million rupees in February 2015 from Brahma Bank, when he knows that in a few days he's going to shut down that bank. Because in January he had already said it to me. He had already said it to me. He's going to shut everything down. In February he removes his money from the bank, and other prominent members of government removes money from the bank. And we talk about the moral high ground of the other side. So good at criticizing. But then again, let's look at the background. And it's important to talk about the background after this intro. Today, let's talk about Afrobarometer. Because that is also important. The whole purpose and purport of a bill about political financing is to fight corruption. Today, when you look at Afrobarometer for Mauritius 2013, 61% of people think that corruption increased in the previous 12 months. I'm not talking about 1%, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. I'm not talking about 2%. I'm not talking about 50%. I'm talking about a humongous figure of 61% of people sondés believe that corruption has increased in the previous 12 months. That is huge. And this is a government that tells us, and my analysis is going to show why government was already convinced from the very outset that it would not get the votes, and this bill is just, in my humble view, a ploy on the part of government in order to tell the electorate we came with the bill. But they never had the intention of even coming with the bill, because they know they will never get the vote. It is just a sham, a lure that is being played for the eyes of the public, with only one thing to get the electorate interested and to say, oh yes, they came. Political mileage and nothing else. Political mileage, calculated, nothing else. Not the interest of democracy and our cleaning it up in their mind. Not at all. A lot of talk. And they say that they walk the talk. A lot of talk. But if they really are to walk the talk, we would not have a speech like Honorable Sisankar said, and I'll come back to him in a minute, about his analysis of the OECD document. I have the impression we read the same document, but when I listen to him, I have the impression that he maybe has not understood what is in the document. And I'll come to that in a minute. Or maybe he has been very economical in his reading or understanding. Fair enough, I do not know what it is, but clearly I'll have to really come back to that in a few minutes. 5% of public service users paid a bribe in the previous 12 months. 62% think their government is doing a bad job of tackling corruption. This is an example, sir, of the bad job of this government in tackling corruption. When you hear Honorable Utims, who has dissected through his analysis of this bill, he dissects the bill. He shows us how there is conflict between those provisions of the bill, the Political Financing Bill and the Representations of People Act. He shows us how there is conflict between the Constitution and this bill. You cannot therefore say that they are doing a good job in trying to tackle corruption. How can we congratulate this government and say, you are doing a fantastic job, when you come up with a bill that gives the president the powers to make regulations and you don't even amend the constitution to empower that particular act? There is clearly a conflict here. So if simple issues of that nature are left in that bill, in French we say, cela fait tâche. Cela fait tâche. And it is not something which is nice to look at, neither is it a good message and a strong message of our will to clean up the political scene. It clearly once again demonstrates that government is not serious in its supposed attempt to clean up the political scenery and to supposedly tackle corruption. Not only do the acts and doings of the manner in which this bill was drafted shows it, and I here mean no disrespect at all to the draft of the legislation, but here my disrespect would most, if there is, and if it says it is there, I do apologize, goes only to members of cabinet who have gone through this piece of legislation to approve that it should come here, and to the advisors of government who have allowed that this bill comes here. With such conflict in legislation of a constitutional nature, where the position of the president is really being reduced. This is confirmation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that this government is not serious about fighting corruption. Oh, then they will come and answer, well, it is not our coffers that had the money. It was your leader who had the coffer. But then again, let me say something else to them. You know what? A simple calculation of the building called SunTrust. A simple calculation of the square footage there. Today, how much does it cost to construct a building of that nature? Even in those days, how much did it cost? I'm not saying it's wrong to put up a building. I'm saying it's totally legitimate. But you will not find me coming to say that all this money that they've taken to build it is through illicit means. You will not see me coming to point fingers at the MSM to say that it is from corrupt means. You will not see me come to point accusing fingers towards Saniwo Jagannath, who was Prime Minister in those days. I will not do that. He was Prime Minister, political financing came from what source? I do not know, because there is no transparency in the accounts of the MSM. The same party that takes the moral ground, high moral ground, and tell us that they are the ones who are whiter than white, and we are the ones who are the sinners and the worst sinners ever. That is what really I do not appreciate. They put up, let's calculate how much that cost in those days. Do we know where the money came from? Do we know what was the source? Some people have said it was billed free of charge. I don't know. We will never know. And then when Honorable Utim says that a trust will not fall within the provisions or the ambit of what is prohibited, then I start thinking, maybe there is something which the government is trying to do only to its own advantage. 47% of people, Afrobarometer says, think that ordinary citizens can make a difference in the fight against corruption. Not government! Almost 50% of the people here that they believe ordinary citizens can make a difference. And I say yes to the people of this country. They are the ones that can make a difference. Because if the figures are like that, it's because they do not have confidence in this government. But what is worse, and let us look at the corruption figures. Corruption figures in 2015, 16% thought that there was corruption between the president and the PM, those two positions in 2015. It's gone up in 2019 to 22%. And it's gone up for MPs as well. In 2015, 19% thought that MPs were corrupt. Today it's 23%. And this is what this excellent work that this government has done in the past almost 5 years. A beautiful mandate. And they have really stuck to their promise. But then again, they are going to, in a few days, watch my word, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, they will come to try to discredit the Afro-Barometer report. Sir Anirudh Jagannath, in this parliament here, when the leader of the opposition talked about the fact that crime was on the increase, referring to Afro-Barometer and the perception of Mauritians that crime, law and order was really failing and crime was on the increase. The minister, Honorable Minister Mentor, said after the Honorable Leader of the Opposition had informed him that it was from Afro-Barometer that he is giving those figures, the Honorable Anirudh Jagannath said, well, it is the fault of the previous regime, the Labour Party. For that, he did not say Afro-Barometer was wrong because it was not credit, it was not worthy of belief. He did not break down their credibility. He said, no, we believe that, but the reason why crime is on the increase, and that's the perception, because of the previous government. So now, let them try, they will try it, break down the credibility of Afro-Barometer. But then again, I have read and I see that this is an organization internationally that receives recognition for their work and their contribution internationally. So it is not a joke when you have ministers coming here to make statements about how good Mauritius is doing, but when there are bad issues like that, we won't hear ministers coming to say, well, you know what, 62% of people now believe, oh no, 1% less. 61% people think that corruption increased in the previous 12 months. And you have this government saying, oh no, they are doing a good job. What else? Recently, everyone knows, we heard Honorable Yutim talk about the report on the drug inquiry, drug commission. We heard him read an extract about political financing and how there was a nexus, at least to try to analyze whether there was a nexus between political financing and the underworld, if I may be called it that way, the underworld, the world of crime, crimes, drugs, drug money. And then when I find that, what, a few days back, 2 days ago, 95 kilos of cocaine getting into Mauritius. And what is interesting, getting into Mauritius and passing by the customs, leaving the customs area without anyone realizing. Strangely enough, because this government has been once again going on the high moral ground saying they are the best government that has implemented new policies to fight against drugs. They have said it. They have really been champions, according to them, of the fight against drugs. But how is it that drugs enter Mauritius, 95 kilos, worth more than 1.4 billion rupees of cocaine? Not any lesser pure drug, cocaine. And then leaves the bonded area, leaves together with the Metro Express, leaves together with Mauricio. When there was the inauguration there, the VIP have the Vipsu of the Prime Minister and all the ministers were there, their bodyguards in that same area, and what? Close to them were drugs of 95 kilos? You mean to say that they did not even have a security swoop of the area before anyone was there? Or that the ADSU did not search that particular tractor? And this means there is a defiance somewhere. From whom? Is it the MRA? Customs? Is it police? Is it ADSU? Is it the Commissioner of Police? But they all lead to one direction. Thank you, sir. You recognized it. The government. Thank you for admitting it. You see, even in the ranks of government, we have the answer coming. Even in the ranks of government, you have a member who says, the government. You see, because you cannot hide from such an obvious truth. So this is the background. And then they will say, well, no, because it was discovered while we were there. Because when you were in power, we could not find such drugs. They were coming in. But so, wait a minute. Those drugs were not discovered by ADSU officers. They were discovered by simple mechanics who were doing their duty. And then everyone knows that the world of betting, with all the betting shops, that's another way of getting money for financing political parties. Those are in all the research documents we've read about the illicit means of financing political parties, the world of betting. You will recall, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that this government said in their manifesto, in the government program, that they would lead a war, not only against drugs, but they would make a war to ensure that this country is not really covered up by the scourge of betting. It would clean up Mauritius to ensure there is no proliferation of the betting shops. Fair enough. Louable comme initiative. But my God, that was another bluff. A huge bluff. Because today, I'm reading another article in Le Défi Plus, and the title is Le mécanisme bien huilé de Monsieur Jean-Michel Lichim. That was in the press. And what I find out here, instead of ensuring that you have a reduction in the number of betting outlets, strange enough, you have interesting annex in the budget of the Honorable Minister of Finance and Prime Minister of this 2019. What does it say in the annex? C9, Gaming Regulatory Authority Act, page 55. The Gaming Regulatory Act will be amended to repeal sections related to the licensing of bookmakers conducting fixed odds betting on local races outside the racecourse. Exempt from the requirement for police clearance with regards to the premises of a local pool promoter. And when you read what proposals they have made in order to facilitate betting, to encourage the propagation of betting houses, to encourage a monopoly of the system with those who are close to government. And then you answer yourself, when you will ensure that there is no longer the requirement for police clearance. But who will be responsible? Qui sera responsable alors pour les vérifications d'usage qui étaient sous la responsabilité de la force policière? Pourquoi alors est-ce que le gouvernement qui se dit gouvernement responsable, un gouvernement qui se dit très intéressé à faire en sorte que law and order is established, that finance and political field is cleaned up, that there are no such issues that happen? How is it therefore that this government decides that they will no longer have the need for police clearance? And the government is going to propose that there are going to be officers of the GRA who are going to do it. And who names the officers of the GRA? Government. So if this is not to protect those who are close to government, what is? When you look at the web of companies and the company fronts that are used, Shouldn't there be an inquiry about all this? And there is one way, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, of really rigging elections. It's through betting houses. There's a way of even making money in spite of the fact that you're going to lose the elections, because they're going to lose it. But they're going to ensure that they can make money out of it, because they are going to make it legal to have betting on the ones who are going to win or to lose. They can artificially change la donne simply using a betting house. And funnily enough, we have this gentleman so close to SMS Parias, you have PMU Maurice, you have all those companies, Sports Data Feed, Lishim Enterprise, PLS, Peak Pool, Integrity Sports, GMLS, Book System, SM, oh my God. We go on and on. Can you imagine that instead of reducing the number of betting houses, what has this government done under this government, under their watch? They have increased the number of betting houses outside. Can you imagine just for one of them, PMU Maurice, above 500 outlets across the island? And if you add SMS Parias to that, we have become par excellence and nation Zougadère that this government was supposedly attacking.
Can you take your seat? We are not debating on a piece of legislation that has got to do with betting in the country. We are debating on a piece of legislation that has got to do with political financing. Can you get to that subject, please?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir.
I've given my ruling, I said. You get back to what we are debating.
I am on what I'm debating. My point is that it is connected to political finance, because this very same, let me go on.
Yeah, but
why is it connected?
Mohamed, take your seat. I have allowed you to make your points. Now I'm requesting you to get back to the piece of legislation we are debating. You've been going on and on debating in the country. That's why I've drawn your attention that the present piece of legislation has got nothing to do with betting.
The rapport Lam Shang Lin on drugs.
And we're not debating on drugs also.
It referred to political financing, and we are debating on this. So that is why, in my humble submission to you, sir, it is clear that even according to the former Justice Lam Shang Lin, in the report, on the Drug Commission report, there was a connection that he was trying to look into between the world of betting and, yes.
Honorable Mohamed, I've given my ruling, I've told you, I've allowed you to make a few comments on betting. Now I'm requesting you to get back to the legislation we are debating. Please.
So coming back to political financing.
Yes, please.
In the Drug Commission inquiry report, there was an issue about a candidate of the MSM having, during the elections...
I'll have to stop you.
Yes?
Please, you're a lawyer. You know that the judicial decision is being awaited with regard to what you are mentioning. You should not dwell on that, please. It is clear, and I'll refer to the precise standing order which is in front of me, that is section 44, and you can refer to that precise section, please.
I'd be very grateful if you could, since you're, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I'm sure that you are more learned than I am with regards to the standing orders. I don't have the book with me. Could you please enlighten me? I'd be very grateful.
This is not my job. When I gave my ruling, I've referred you to that section. If you want to read that section, you read that section.
Because my humble view is that you would reason the...
Yeah, even I've got humble view. Why do you think you're the most intelligent person in this house?
You see, obviously, when you hear the Deputy Prime Minister wake up and start listening now, it means that basically the message has gone through. It means that it's hurt. It's really hurt. Please ask him to withdraw what he just said.
I withdraw. You're the most intelligent person.
Could you ask him to withdraw what
He
he
is
said?
serious, withdraw.
I'm withdrawing it.
He insulted me as well.
Yes. I'm withdrawing it.
That's the problem when you do cross-talking in the House. And I've said that before.
I'm talking to
It applies
you.
to everybody. And it applies to everybody.
I don't think it was cross-talking that allowed this little man to insult me. Yes, and that is not unparliamentary. That's fact. Thank you. Anyway. And now we get to the issues when you have another element which I think is of utmost importance. The abuse made by government in political financing prior to elections. Everyone knows, as Honorable Utim rightly said, and other honorable members, we all know when it is the Honorable Prime Minister who knows when elections are going to be called for. And give you a simple example. So the simple example is on the 11th of May, there was an inauguration of what Mauritius Telecom is setting up everywhere called MUGA, M-U-G-A. Mauritius Telecom has as shareholder, everyone knows the state, how closely connected it is to Mauritius Telecom, the people of Mauritius and the shares in Mauritius Telecom. Everyone knows who is the one and how the person who is named at the head of Mauritius Telecom, the political nominee of government, gets his position there. On the 11th of May, there was this inauguration, but on the 7th of May, 2019, 150 people were invited on the 15th floor of Mauritius Telecom Tower for a briefing by the CEO of Mauritius Telecom. And those 150 people invited on the 15th floor of Mauritius Telecom Tower were all political agents of this government. And why were they invited? Because they obtained a briefing and it's really hurting, isn't it? I see it's really hurting.
Please.
And now the question which I ask, and I believe that the people of Mauritius should know and ask themselves, is as following. Why is it that this piece of legislation does not take into account this type of political financing? Because in my humble view, this is political financing. It is political financing when Mauritius Telecom, as an example, and there are others, spend money belonging to Mauritius Telecom for political benefit of the party in power. And on top of it, on the 15th floor, finger buffet was offered on that day. All on the budget of MT Foundation. MT Foundation, where should the money be going? Should it not be going to causes like helping the downtrodden and the poor? Are they telling us that this was an activity to help the downtrodden and the poor, to invite political agents on the 15th floor of Mauritius Telecom Tower with the CEO making a speech there to explain to them how to go and sell the project and tell people that the government is doing a fantastic job? This is political financing that is not covered by this piece of legislation. And my question is, why is it this legislation is silent about this type of financing prior to the nomination day and prior to the date of elections being announced by the Prime Minister? Now, I have listened to Honorable Sisankar read about the report, and I here have in my hand the OECD Public Governance Reviews on Financing Democracy. And in that particular document, in Chapter 5, the chapter is about ensuring compliance with political finance regulations. And in that, at page 97 of that report, and I presume it is the same report that my good friend Honorable Sisankar read, but allow me to refer to page 97 of that report, OECD Public Governance Reviews Financing Democracy, and in the paragraph the fourth paragraph of that page, I read, despite the variety of institutional arrangements, the following factors are considered critical for a proper functioning of supervisory bodies. Independent, number one, independent appointment of its members. So here we're talking about the Electoral Supervisory Commission. Independent appointment of its members, independence from both political parties and the executive at the same time. This is what the OECD says. So the members on the Electoral Supervisory Commission should be protected. Because once when you protect the members of the Electoral Supervisory Commission, you protect their reputation, you also protect the reputation of the ESC. Therefore, government should ensure that when it proceeds to nominations of people, that they should not in any way at least give the perception to the people that those nominations are not in order. Because perception of wrongdoing, perception of bias, perception of a lack of independence is dangerous because it spoils the name of the institution. I am not saying more than what I'm saying. The government, in the two precedent nominations of members of the ESC, have acted in such a way that they have spoiled the reputation of an important institution as the ESC. Because clearly, when starting to nominate people who can be seen in political activism of the party in power, bearing the same colors as the people in power, then it is something that can spoil the perception of people. And here what the OECD says, independent appointment of its members, independence from both political parties and the executive at the same time. This is in brackets, at the same time. And security of their tenure. So security of tenure alone is not sufficient. The manner in which we are to preserve the perception of the independence of this institution and the manner that we preserve the methodology of nomination is of utmost importance. Independent budget providing sufficient resources and specialized expertise of personnel and methodologies to discover illegal funding of political parties and candidates. So as we speak today, the intention of the Honorable Prime Minister, I believe, if I got it right, was to come with this piece of legislation to ensure not only that we give those additional powers to the Electoral Supervisory Commission, commendable in its intention, but there's a big but. If I understand him correctly, he also wanted that this piece of legislation be enforced as soon as possible for it to be applicable before the next elections, for the next elections. If this is what he wanted, why is it that when we look at this report of the OECD, and one of the factors that the OECD says that are critical for the proper functioning of supervisory bodies is precisely specialized expertise of personnel. Does the ESC have specialized expertise of personnel? As we speak today, no. What are the plans of government to give this specialized expertise of personnel to the ESC? We have heard nothing about it. Can we therefore say that government is committed in its aim to cleaning up the political financing scenery? No. Otherwise, I would have seen government come up with a proposal. Not only do we come up with legislation, but we also come up with capacity building methods, capacity building plans for the ESC. Not only for specialized expertise personnel, but methodologies to discover illegal funding. Is the Electoral Supervisory Commission qualified? Does it have the capacity to have within its midst methodologies to discover illegal funding of political parties and candidates? The answer is no, it doesn't. And does government have any plan with regards to that? We haven't heard from it. Now, In the same report concerning the appointment of members of oversight bodies, it says here in the last paragraph of page 97, according to the US model, there is an equal division between Democrats and Republican members on that particular oversight body. This is not the case here, because the Constitution is as such that we have seen, even when the leader of the opposition has something to say, it is not something which really the President of the Republic has to take into account, because he can decide on his own free will. That's what the Constitution says, who to nominate on the Electoral Supervisory Commission. So it is not as if there is an equal representation thereon with the views of the parties of the opposition that really count, because at the end of the day, the views of the parties of the opposition does not mean a thing if it is decided by the President of the Republic whom he is going to nominate, and I need not say more about what normally happens. Now, in the United Kingdom, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the chair of the Electoral Commission is appointed by a parliamentary committee chaired by the Speaker of the House of Commons. This is where the representatives of the people, the members of Parliament, have a say. It says here, the chair of the Electoral Commission, which is the oversight body in the United Kingdom, is appointed by a parliamentary committee chaired by the Speaker of the House of Commons. The Speaker, by convention, gives up all party affiliations and acts as a political neutral figure. Oh, that would have been so lovely. However, this is a matter of political culture, it says, the report, and would not work in all countries. In some countries, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, a senior judge acts as the head of the supervisory body. And here, this is what we need to do. We need to be able to create this trust of the people into the system. And this is where it's lacking. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, there's one thing which is of utmost importance here. When there was the proposals that were made by government as far as political financing is concerned, and Honorable Sisanko is right, the government is the one that proposed public financing of political parties. He's right about that. And yes, the people of Mauritius were not happy with the proposal. It's not because the opposition went to see them for them not to be happy. That would be a total disrespect, a lack of respect for the people of Mauritius to think that they only react because the opposition tells them what to say or how to think. No. The people of Mauritius are intelligent people. They have made up their mind. They had come up in arms and were totally against the proposal of government, and we've heard it on all media, written as well as on the social networks. We've heard about it on the radio stations. We've read it, we've heard it. People in Mauritius do not like the idea of public financing. And there is one reason. Because what the equation that was proposed was itself uncanny. But then again, very typical of the government in power. It provided for a system whereby, such as gargantua, which is not a wrong word, gargantua does, you know, this greedy creature that swallows everything in its path. Government would swallow most of public financing on the simple equation that it had more representatives in parliament, so all the others too bad. But then again, fair enough. This is the equation that they thought would be good. This is what people did not see was fair, because Mauritians like fairness. And when they see unfairness in what is being proposed, that is why the people did not like it. Now, as far as this particular proposal, in this particular bill, at no time has there been any public consultation, as is this is what is being said by the opposition. On this particular version, there has been no public consultation. And then we are told by honorable members on the other side that we should have consulted the website. But the website, and what? We were supposed to send a memo to the Prime Minister, those are our views? Why is it that the Honorable Prime Minister could not simply, on electoral issue, or for an amendment to the Constitution, why could he not call for a simple parliamentary meeting, a round table for us to discuss? If this was really what he wanted to do, why is it that he did not do it? And it's not that there were no calls on the part of the opposition. The opposition has unanimously always said that it would prefer that there were consultations on this. The opposition has never said, we do not agree. The opposition has never said, we'll shut the doors. The opposition has said, consult, but consult in a reasonable, constructive manner, which is normal and which is to call upon the leaders of the parliamentary groups here and to discuss and to make proposals. At the end of the day, yes, government will decide what version to bring to this House. But at least we would have given a chance to consultation. It is not us who would dictate what government must do, but it would, before coming to Parliament, at least give us a chance to sit around a table to discuss and make proposals. Not simply tell us, go to the previous version that is on the website, go to the previous version and send us your views in a document or by email. That is now not how government should work, and this is certainly not how we should work among parliamentarians. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, there are not only, we are here talking about political parties in this House, but there are other political parties outside. And the political parties outside. You have, let me take one example, Résistance and Alternative. Let me take another one, Lalit. Those are organizations, well-structured organizations, and it would be wrong on our part as members of Parliament to believe that those parties do not have good ideas. Some of their ideas are great ideas. Some of the ideas they have to contribute to the growth of this nation are indeed fantastic ideas. Unfortunately, there is no level playing field, and the OECD report, which Honorable Sisankar talked about, also says that there is the need to create a level playing field. And what is a level playing field? A level playing field is not a system as proposed by this government, because let's look at it clearly, what it says here. You have the accounting records, fair enough, but you also have the statement of accounts. And it is the statement of accounts that the proposal of the Prime Minister, he says, it is the statement of accounts that have to be sent to the Electoral Supervisory Commission, not the Register of Accounts. The Register of Accounts will have the names of those who have given, but the Statement of Accounts, when you look at the schedule that provides for the format of the Statement of Accounts, it's in the schedule of the bill. I look at Statement of Accounts, nowhere is it provided here that you have to give the name of the donor. Now, we don't have to be on the same wavelength at every single time, be it with government or the opposition. But my view is that we should have total transparency. I would like to know, members of the public outside would like to know who is giving money to the government in power. Because what the OECD report says is that when you have a transparent system and then you create a level playing field, not only as far as information goes, because you have to be able to verify where the money comes from and to see whether there is any kickback at some stage of the equation. Because, for example, you have companies that come with unsolicited bids, even during the mandate of this particular government. We've heard about it, creating scandals. But have those companies that obtain unsolicited contracts, have they contributed to the coffers of the MSM? I don't know. Maybe. How much? When? This is what we call transparency. True it is that if you have an independent institution that is strong enough, not only the ESC but other institutions as well, then there will be no reason to fear that there will be any retaliation on the part of any government. The reason why this fear exists is precisely because our institutions do not work conveniently, properly, in order to allay those fears. Now, let's imagine and come back to Résistance Alternative. Why is it that we cannot create a system whereby all political parties have access to finance equally? Why is it we can't do that? Why is it that only the traditional parties, and I, from the Labour Party, being from the oldest party in Mauritius, say it, why is it that we have to create a system whereby only the traditional parties, those who are here, will forever continue to benefit from political financing with ease, whereas all the new movements outside, they don't have the chance to fund their elections and to stand at least a reasonable chance of finding their way to become elected members of parliament, because they also have ideas that can help to grow our country. They also have those revolutionary ideas and suggestions that deserve to be heard in this parliament from members of their political party. This is enriching democracy, and this is what a proper legislation about political financing should aim to achieve. And this piece of legislation is a far cry from precisely that. It, on the contrary, creates a situation where, as rightly said by Honorable Utim again, money cannot be given to a candidate, but money must be given to the treasurer. In actual fact, what they are trying to do here is to perpetuate the strength and the domination of the leader. This is what they're trying to perpetuate. Is that it is, and that is why we heard speeches like that. You heard the speeches from all members on the other side, all congratulating, in as if by rote, having learnt it, congratulating the Prime Minister. And it is as though there is the need to do that. Because if you do not do that, I presume, then the ticket is in danger. That is what is dangerous for democracy. We cannot create a situation where it is the head of the party, the treasurer and the administration, they are the ones who will hold the power and wield the power, and not other ideas. Now, there are certain people, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, who fail to understand that there is the need to democratize access to Parliament by ensuring that we have a political finance bill that creates this access for all. Now, when you look at this piece of legislation, again, I've talked about the issue of financing and it going to the treasurer, but for me, it is clear, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that this piece of legislation has been carved by government in such a way as to have been a strategy in the making ever since 2014, 2015. It is something that was cooked. It was something that was allowed to simmer. But it was something that finally saw the light of day in this piece of legislation, because the strategy of government, it is not something that happened ever since the setting up of a ministerial committee of any sorts. This is the strategy of government. Destroy your opponents financially, give them a bad name, whilst we in government ensure that we can cruise towards ease of financing our own political party, and then we come with a bill where we impose blockages, and those blockages will ensure that we'll handicap our opponents. This is Machiavellic on the part of this government. Now, this is the way they want to run this country. But one thing which I'd like to say to conclude is as follows. I'd like to make a prayer, and my plea to the Prime Minister is as follows. Access to this August Assembly should not be reserved only for the traditional parties we're so used to seeing here. I have had the pleasure during my career of speaking to those who most probably will never find themselves here because of lack of funds and lack of finance. Because running an election campaign costs money. To make your views known and to let it known to everyone, it's not like it was done in the 50s, the 60s and the 70s. Things have changed. And those political parties, there are others, there are many other parties. I'm just referring to those two, like La Lutte and Résistance and Alternative, but they deserve our respect. And all politicals out there, political parties, there needs to be a level playing field for them to have an equal chance in the eyes of the public. There are certain countries in the Commonwealth that have a system, is that at the time of when elections are called, there is a caretaker government that comes in. And when that caretaker government comes in, the government in power moves out, and it is the civil servants that run the country during that time until elections. The reason why this happens is precisely to ensure that they do not take advantage of the power that they have whilst in government to fausser la donne in terms of financing or access to finance, and to do things that would really create an imbalance in the ability to present oneself. Such countries, such laws exist in electoral systems in the Commonwealth. And this is what I believe we should have. And in so doing, that would create a level playing field and transparency. I also believe that members of the public should have access to the knowledge. If a member of the public wants to know who financed the Labour Party, when and how, it should have this at the touch of his finger, online, as it's done in other Scandinavian countries and many other countries belonging to the OECD, where access to information is not available only to commissions like the Electoral Supervisory Commission. It is available to the public. And this is real democracy, where the public have access to it. And my plea, therefore, to government is to improve this piece of legislation. It would be wrong to say, let us start somewhere and later on we'll improve it. Because that would mean, let us know that we can improve it, but let's start with very low expectations and very low standards. Because we cannot allow ourselves to have low standards, because the public outside expect us to give them quality work with the highest of standards. This is what would really recreate and rebuild the trust between the public, the electorate, and politicians in here. I thank you for your attention, sir. I've done.